Hello there. Tough guy film expert Mike Malloy here. Now, when I lived in Los Angeles in the early aughts, I wrote for a lot of movie magazines and I dreamt of having my own movie magazine. I wanted to call it Subgenre Cine Magazine. It never happened, but my brain has always categorized the body of cinema in terms of various different subgenres. And when I saw Rulers of the City for the first time on VHS under the title Mr. Scarface, I immediately realized it belonged to a subgenre I like to call, as a child I saw my father murdered and I want revenge now that I'm grown. Catchy, huh? Sure, if you were to pin the film to a cinematic movement, it would be the Eurocrime or Poliziotteschi movement, the Italian-made crime films that were so popular in their home country in the 1970s. But as for belonging to the I saw my father murdered subgenre, Rulers of the City fits perfectly. And just so you know what I'm talking about here, this subgenre includes everything from the spaghetti western Death Rides a Horse, to the Scorsese film Gangs of New York, to the sword and sandal movie Conan the Barbarian. And by the way, I only count the movies that actually show the main character as a child at some point, either in an opening sequence or in flashbacks. It doesn't count if the murder of the father is just mentioned by the adult hero as part of a backstory. So, no, Princess Bride, even though a certain character won't shut up about seeing his father murdered and seeking revenge, it doesn't count because we never see him as a kid, and we didn't see the father's murder. By that logic, Godfather 2 doesn't count either, because even though you do see Vito Corleone as a youngster, and he does eventually get his revenge as the Robert De Niro incarnation, you didn't see the father's murder. The film starts with the father's funeral and mentions the murder in an on-screen title. Anyway, Rulers of the City, like I said, fits perfectly, as it uses a lot of the subgenre's hallmarks. It front-loads the scene of the child witnessing the father's murder. A lot of the films in this subgenre go that route instead of flashbacks. And with the slicked-down hair, it makes efforts to make Jack Palance's character look different, I guess younger, than he appears in the rest of the film. That's, of course, a necessity in convincing the viewer that time has passed. But now, when the films in this subgenre go the chronological route, by starting with the scene of the father's murder, they usually then dissolve, or cut, to a shot of the son, the hero of the film, as an adult. A western called Death Rides a Horse springs immediately to mind. The opening sequence of that ends with a close-up of a crying blonde child, and then it dissolves to a close-up of a blonde adult. The viewer immediately understands who this adult is. And that's where Rulers of the City provides a nice twist. The prologue shows the father's murder witnessed by a brown-haired son, and then it cuts to a credits montage featuring a brown-haired young man. The viewer makes the presumption that these two are the same character at different ages. But no, the movie has pulled some audience misdirection, and it turns out the blonde secondary lead, whom we've met along the way, is actually the son who witnessed his father's murder at the hands of the Jack Palance crime lord. And playing with audience expectations is where this subgenre is most interesting. But I'll come back to that. First, let's acknowledge that, as an Italian crime film, it's not surprising that Rulers of the City would use the I saw my father murdered storyline. And another Italian crime film, the Spanish co-production The Summertime Killer, used that plot too. Yeah, that still on the left shows the father being forcibly drowned, and yeah, his son sees it all happen. But here's why it's not surprising. See, the Italian film industry was very fad-oriented back then, and this Eurocrime genre was what replaced the spaghetti westerns as the dominant action fad in the country. As one Italian film fad was dying off and another one was coming up, there was rumored to always be a period in which Italian screenwriters would hastily rework, say, their western scripts to become crime scripts. They needed to make sure the idea they were pitching was in line with the current cinematic trends. Now, I'm not saying Rulers of the City or The Summertime Killer began life as Western stories, but I do know that plenty of Italian westerns use the "I saw my father murdered" plot. Best known of these is Death Rides a Horse, which stars Lee Van Cleef as a character who has a complicated relationship with the type of character we're discussing here, the young boy who saw his father murdered, then grew to be a revenge-obsessed adult. And all the best films of this subgenre do feature complicated relationships. How boring would it be if the revenge seeker just grew up and got revenge? That's a little too straightforward. So, for instance, Rulers of the City has the revenge seeker joining the gang run by his father's murderer. Same for Scorsese's Gangs of New York. In a 1990 indie named Kid, the revenge seeker returns to the town where his father was murdered and is then beginning to get very friendly, almost romantic, with the daughter of a man he's there to kill. So yeah, it makes sense from the vantage of storytelling complexity to make sure the revenge seeker somehow gets into cahoots with either his father's murderer or those surrounding him. Back to Italian westerns though, Death Rides a Horse wasn't the only one. Another interesting example is the obscure, low-budget spaghetti, The Son of Django. Little enough is known about this film that I'm not sure how it came together, but the finished film is about a boy named Tracy who witnesses his father, Django, get shot in the back, and then Tracy grows up to track down the man who killed his father. Now, using a character named Django was like a fad within a fad. Yeah, the Django films, both official and unofficial, were a fad within the spaghetti western fad. And again, I don't know how the Son of Django production came together, but if you were a producer and you already had a finished western that had nothing to do with the Django character, think about how easy the "I saw my father murdered" story would have allowed you to crowbar in a Django element. Yeah, all you would have had to do was a quick pickup shoot in order to add the prologue scene of Django being killed and his son witnessing it, and then change the dubbing so that the main character is walking around as the adult version of the kid, looking to avenge the death of his father, Django. The films were shot without live sound on the sets anyway, so it's easy to change the story of an Italian film in the dubbing. So, with minimal commitment to the Django character, you get a film you can sell as a Django movie. So as I said earlier, subverting audience expectations is where this subgenre shines. That 1990 independent revenge film, Kid, is a good example of this. In that film, a stranger arrives in a small town, and in flashback, we learn that his hippie parents had tried to start a commune just outside town, and the flashbacks further reveal that a posse of locals showed up and murdered the parents in front of their son. And now that son, grown and looking an awful lot like C. Thomas Howell, has returned and wants to kill the rest of the posse. And I say the rest of the posse because the film eventually reveals, via continued flashbacks, that the kid had actually started his retribution back in the flashback time frame before he was grown. That's a nice twist. We didn't really expect that. And yes, in case you're wondering, Kid plays an awful lot like a present-day, American-made spaghetti western. Now, in Kid, you may have caught the fact that both parents were murdered. Yes, that happens in some of these films. Another one that springs to mind is the John Milius film Conan the Barbarian. Both of young Conan's parents are killed near the beginning, including, of course, his father. But because Conan's mother makes a big final stand at the end of the battle scene, young Conan by her side, people tend to remember the mother's death. But fact is, sometimes it is both parents that are killed, but when it's only one parent being murdered, it's almost always the father. Okay, a couple of last thoughts on this subgenre. You can also make this type of movie more complex by setting the vengeance quest against other backdrops. Gangs of New York does this, and it ends up basically with 3 levels. There's the revenge story, and that's set against the battle of Irish immigrant gangs against American-born gangs, and that's set against the riots that protested against the draft for the U.S. Civil War. And all 3 conflicts come to a head simultaneously. Speaking of a film's climax, that's another way Rulers of the City subverts audience expectations. Near the end of the film, the Al Cliver character brings the Jack Palance character back to the scene of the crime, where he gets his own personal justice for his father. That's a nice touch, being back in the same location again. But the Palance character is killed then and there, right before the big action sequence that serves as the film's climax. That's pretty unusual, but it might have been a practical decision. Despite the way these DVD and VHS covers look, Jack Palance is only a supporting actor in his 3 Italian crime films, and maybe director Fernando De Leo only had Jack for a few days on Rulers of the City. Maybe they couldn't afford to have Jack around for the production of an extensive action sequence. Anyways, it works to the film's advantage because the I saw my father murdered story is a formula, let's face it, and any twist you can put on a formula is a good thing. As for me, while I never got to do Subgenre Cinemagazine as either a magazine or a website, I did get to tackle a bunch of my favorite tough guy film subgenres as Blu-ray extras. Yeah, I've been working pretty steadily creating Blu-ray supplements for the last decade, and during that time I created, for instance, such videos as the cop sleaze movement of the early 1980s, a survey of the odd couple handcuffed together subgenre, and most recently, as a child I saw my father murdered and I want revenge now that I'm grown. But it would have been fun to do subgenre as a mag or a website. One of the proposed taglines was, "Whatever you're watching, it's not new." Okay, I'm going to roll closing credits while we honor the child actors who appear in these films, because they're massively overshadowed by their adult movie star counterparts. Boy, it's so nice when a film's official publicity materials include a still of the kid version of the character. That makes my job here so much easier.